Thank you so much for including me on today's agenda. It's really an honor to be here and speaking to this group today. I'd also really like to express my appreciation for Dr. Lisa Levin and some of the earlier speakers who I know have really kind of set the scene about deep ocean science and conservation and the importance of the deep ocean in understanding and responding to a lot of the global challenges that we're facing today. It saves me some time so I can really jump into some of the policy elements. I'm going to be talking today about US science and policy focused around conservation in the deep sea. So just a quick overview of the talk today. I'll be starting really at the high level and then going down into the more granular work. So talking about MPA management within the US, our approach to 30 by 30, the National Nature Assessment, the newly released Ocean Climate Action Plan, a broad strategy that we're undertaking to map, explore, and characterize all of the U.S. exclusive economic zone. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about my program, NOAA Ocean Exploration, and a partner program within NOAA that focuses on deep sea corals and sponges. And finally, talk about how those data are used to inform management and conservation. So this slide here is just an overview of the marine protected areas in U.S. waters. A couple of things I want to point out. First, we have a really spread out EEZ, so it's kind of hard to look at. So I've chunked it into two, but the scales are really different across the full Pacific and then on our eastern shoreboard. So 26% of the U.S. EEZ is protected at fully or highly protected levels. But it is important to point out that those islands in the Pacific Ocean is where a vast majority of our marine protected area exists. But you can see that, all along the West Coast, Alaska, the East Coast, Gulf of Mexico, Great Lakes, we do have marine protected areas all throughout all of our various regions within the U.S. So there's two primary ways in which marine protected areas are established federally within the United States. So the first is national marine sanctuaries. These are managed by NOAA, but sometimes in partnership with the states. They're designated through NOAA administrative action or legislation by Congress. It's a community nomination process. It takes many years and involves extensive public engagement, stakeholder engagement, and official public comment. The Marine National Monuments is established through presidential proclamation through what we call the Antiquities Act, which allows us to protect places with historic and meaningful relevance. The public process is not required to establish a marine national monument, although in most cases in practice, some public engagement does happen. And it's typically managed by multiple government agencies. So NOAA, Department of Interior, our state governments, etc. There are a few other types of marine protected areas in our waters. We have national parks, national wildlife refuges, the National Estuarine Research Reserves, and state and tribal counterparts to these programs. So we do have a number of marine protected areas that lie entirely in state waters. There are some de facto protections, for example, areas that they're not protected for conservation outcomes, but for safety or security reasons that end up with conservation outcomes. And we also have various fishery management areas that have various levels of protection. In his first week in office, President Biden issued an executive order tackling the climate crisis at home and abroad that included a call to conserve 30% of land and sea by 2030. This initiative is called America the Beautiful. And some of the principles that guide this initiative are a collaborative and inclusive approach to conservation that benefits all people, supports locally led and locally designed conservation efforts, honors tribal sovereignty, creates jobs, honors private property rights, uses science as a guide, and builds on existing tools and strategies. The National Nature Assessment is a new initiative that's being undertaken. It's modeled on the National Climate Assessment. This is focused on taking stock of U.S. lands, waters, wildlife, and the benefits they provide to our economy, health, climate, environmental justice, and national security. This new initiative was announced on Earth Day 2022, and it's intended to be delivered in 2026 to assess the status, the observed trends, and future projections of our lands, waters, wildlife, biodiversity, and ecosystems. There's a robust public engagement activities that are underway, a series of listening sessions. I think they actually just had their coastal and marine listening sessions this past week, a long open public comment period, and this will really be developed from the ground up with strong community engagement to decide how to go about this and then to start actually building out this nature assessment. The Ocean Climate Action Plan was just recently released as a whole of government approach to ocean-based climate solutions to mitigate and adapt to impacts of climate change. It's focused around kind of three overarching themes. The first is to create a carbon neutral future without harmful emissions. So the focus under this topic is offshore wind, which has been a big Biden administration priority, green shipping, marine carbon dioxide sequestration and removal. The second theme is on accelerating nature-based solutions like protection of blue carbon ecosystems and marine protected areas that are climate adaptive. The third is to enhance community resilience to ocean change, climate-ready fisheries, and coastal climate change. Some overarching themes that kind of apply to all of these are robust science and technology enterprise to support this, focus on ocean justice, and true engagement with our tribal communities. The National Strategy for Mapping, Exploring, and Characterizing the United States Exclusive Economic Zone was established in 2020 through a presidential memorandum. Although it is now codified into our legislation, this passed in December of 2022. This effort is focused on coordinating across all of our federal agencies to map, explore, and characterize the United States Exclusive Economic Zone. The goal is to map all waters of the EEZ by 2030 for waters deeper than 40 meters, and by 2040 for the entire EEZ, to explore and characterize priority areas of the EEZ, to develop and mature the technologies that's going to take to get us there. It's a really ambitious goal to do all that mapping and exploration, and we need to develop capabilities to do this faster and cheaper and automated. And finally, to build public and private partnerships to accomplish these goals. This strategy is implemented through a series of regional campaigns. So we have the folks like me back in DC kind of thinking really big picture, and then we work with a lot of our experts and partners out in our various regions of the nation. So it's just a scattering of campaigns that we have on the West Coast, Atlantic, our Great Lakes, Alaska, and Florida. This group has gone through a prioritization process to identify priority areas for ocean exploration and characterization. Of course, much of what we're thinking about with exploration and characterization focuses on some of those other priorities I talked about: understanding biodiversity for the nature assessment, getting critical information to inform ocean climate action, The priorities that were identified in this report are sensitive seafloor ecosystems like deep sea corals, ocean cultural heritage, marine resources, seafloor hazards, and broadly the water column. The geographic priorities that were identified are the Aleutian Arc off of Alaska, the US Caribbean islands like Puerto Rico, the California coastal region, and the Pacific Islands. I'm going to talk a little bit about my program, NOAA Ocean Exploration. As you can probably surmise from the name, we are one of the key participants in the national strategy for ocean mapping, exploration, and characterization. Our office is dedicated to exploring the unknown ocean, unlocking its potential through scientific discovery, technological advancements, and data delivery. We do this through a variety of different mechanisms. So we have in-house operations. The NOAA ship Okeanos Explorer is equipped with a remotely operated vehicle, which has a suite of environmental sensors on it. The ship is equipped with multi-beam bathymetry for deep seafloor mapping. We have capabilities to collect biological samples, geological samples, environmental DNA, and we also have capacity to do some new technology testing and modes of operations on that vessel. We also have a substantial grants program, which has focused on 3 key areas: fundamental ocean exploration and discovery, technology development, and marine archaeology. We do most of our work in partnership with other entities, so other federal agencies, other programs within NOAA, academia, industry, philanthropy, nonprofit organizations. Really work with a lot of different people to execute on our mission. Since the very start of the program, there's been a strong emphasis on public availability of data. And we continue to work on developing truly accessible data products and services and to connect with our data user communities. We have a strong emphasis on education and outreach to inspire the public and the next generation. We work very closely with another program within NOAA, the Deep Sea Coral Research and Technology Program. Its mission is sound science to conserve vulnerable ecosystems. They are congressionally mandated to locate, map, and conduct research on deep sea coral ecosystems. We work a lot in partnership with them through our ship operations and some of our grant-funded activities and more. I'd like to talk a little bit now about how some of these data are used to inform conservation. So it is really expensive to study the deep ocean and resource intensive. It takes large ships to get out there. And so our number of observations of deep sea corals and other important animals in the deep sea is incredibly limited. And so we use a tool of predictive spatial models to predict where deep sea corals may be located based on where we know we've seen them before, where there's presence data, and the environmental factors that are likely to support them. So a number of different factors go into these predictive models. So coral presence, so where have we seen corals in our limited observations? Temperature, salinity, and oxygen. Surface chlorophyll, so the productivity at the surface. Sediment grain size, what does the seafloor actually look like there? The depth, rugosity, which is kind of the shape of the seafloor, and a number of other variables all go into these models to help predict distributions of deep sea corals. I'm showing 2 examples here. This is off the northeast coast of the United States. I don't recall which species these are, but just pick 2 that have kind of different distributions. You can see the much broader distribution on the image on the right. So I wanted to talk a little bit about one specific example where these distribution models were used to inform marine protections. So this is off the mid-Atlantic, so kind of off the Washington, D.C. area. Um, uh, the coral distribution models were developed. So in the photo on the left-hand side, which I recognize is really busy, but demonstrates a lot here, you can see those kind of red diagonal streaks. Those are showing locations, likely locations of corals. And they used these spatial models and then engaged in robust stakeholder engagement process with fishermen, nonprofits, academic scientists to adjust the boundaries of the marine protected area to help meet the various stakeholder needs while also addressing conservation concerns. So on that image on the left, you can kind of see all the different lines from the various inputs. And these stakeholder groups did come to consensus on 15 proposed deep sea coral protection areas, which cover all 28 major canyons in the mid-Atlantic region. So I hope this talk was helpful to you to kind of tie together some of the big picture of what we're working on in the US and get into some of the detail about how we use our science to inform our management. Some of the key takeaways that I see kind of looking at this from a big picture is that it is really important to connect both up and down the chain of the high level goals, 30 by 30, big, broad, high level goals to the on the ground work that people are really doing in their local communities. It's essential to have robust stakeholder engagement at all steps of these processes, and high quality data products and modeling can really inform decision makers and can lead to some true conservation outcomes. So I'd like to thank you again for letting me speak with this group today. My email is up here. My program's web address is here if you're interested in learning more. Thank you.